Now, these stories would also set the tone of our conversations as we dialogue around issues in the news this morning. Joining us in our studio as our guest analyst on the program this morning is a revered social commentator and economic analyst, Dr. Aliyu Ilias. Doctor, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Now, it's a day where there are a lot of stories, particularly concerning Nigeria. But one that concerns Nigerians in diaspora, talking about our West African neighbors in Ghana, is a Nigeria Must Go protest, much similar to the Ghana Must Go protest that held back in Nigeria in the early 80s.
Right. I think, in the early 80s, I recalled in our compound, we used to have a Ghanaian who used to be there to work. The reasons why they actually came that time was the economic woe. Ghana was suffering and they need to look for a greener pasture. So Nigeria was like a greener pasture as a den. So, but for now, I saw the protest and I saw what is on the placard. If you see what is on the placard, the narrative is a bit different. You see that we are being termed with negative things. I don't want to be telling you what is on the inscription.
No, we can go into that because it's no news. We also read them on the headline stories. They're talking about Nigerians being number one in prostitution in Ghana, Nigerians being the ones peddling kidnapping, trafficking in Ghana, all the negative narrative,
and that's my concern. When we are not there to actually do normal work. Now it is much more of negative. Look at that level of narrative that is actually happening. Though Ghana also have some stifling law against Nigerians. I doubt if a Nigerian can own a shop in Ghana. You have to go through the third party before you can get the shop, not directly. But be that as it may, I think it's because of the narrative that we're having in Nigeria. So it's also trickled down to people that are outside. So it's a bad one, and I think Nigerian government need to do more, especially our High Commissioner in Ghana. They need to sanitize people that are actually there. We must not be known for this, because during that time that Ghanaians were here, honestly, we know them for dint of hard work. I can tell you they do shoemaking. That's what they do majorly during that period, and I saw some of them doing bricklaying. Those are the things with dignity.
And in the academia as well, because I had one of my
teachers. Yes, most of our teachers, some of our teachers are Ghanaian, so they are doing that in their endeavors, both informal and formal job. But this one that Nigerians actually they call Nigerian for, and we will not say they are not saying the truth, because those things they are mentioning is also bedeviling us here in Nigeria. So I think High Commissioner need to do more so that we'll stop creating that wrong narrative whereby we have some people that are doing dint of hard work to make Nigerian better in their
Now, I was listening to Professor Jerry Ghana talk about the need to revive the Naira and open Nigeria up for investment. He cited an experience with one of his, would I call it mentees, who told him about the currency difference, saying he had to change over 200,000 Naira and got only bought 1,000 CDs.
100% correct. So, as an economist, this is what we go through every day. I can tell you that even if you go neighboring Cameroon, Chad, their money is much more valuable. I recall there was a particular time I went to Cotonou to bought a car. I have to, when you take Nigerian Naira there, it's very humongous. That I have to go and pay small and come to my border to deposit, because I cannot carry the whole money to be too bulky. But now it is the other way round. So it's a very sad thing to see, though it has some economic benefits.
What are those benefits?
Right. You will recall now that there is much more export in Nigeria, export than import, and it's because of the Naira value. So sometimes you could see South Korea, you could see that their Naira is like, their currency to dollar is like 1,500 or so. You look at yuan of China, this Chinese yuan is also very, very low. But they intentionally devalue because they have productivity. They are producing. So Nigeria it is the best opportunity for Nigeria now to increase our production capacity, because it's easy to export and difficult to import. You could also see politically, most people that actually corrupt, so to say, that before they would take our money and stash it in the foreign banks. Now it's not lucrative anymore, and that's why you see that they engage in building estates, because if you don't use the money here, you cannot take it across and it has value, because you are changing your 1,500 naira to $1. So what are you stashing abroad? Why are you taking the money? Why are you laundering the money out? So it's reducing, because you can only use that money here, and that's why you see that most of them that actually have that excess currency in their hand, Nigerian money, they have to go and embark on investing, and that's why real estate is booming. That's why you could also see that if you look at our GDP, real estate is ranked third because
outside other oil,
because people do not have opportunity than to take money outside than so production. So if government want to do now, this is the best time to empower MSME manufacturing sector to do more so that we can actually export, because import is being discouraged.
Now, I know you use the adage of greener pastures,
right,
referring to Ghana as it is now.
It is.
Now, it's also from the
even Angola. You'll be surprised.
The ease of getting visas as compared to getting visas from embassies here in Nigeria. Most Nigerians like to take the Ghana route to make their travels easier. And now that Ghana is much sought after in this case, what can the federal government do to manage the situation with many Nigerians obviously doing their businesses, having relocated to Ghana or using Ghana as a transit route?
I remember my grandmother, she's also Ghanaian-based business person. They used to go with, I forgot what it's called in English now, pardon me. No, this they used to put in eyelash and what are the
eyeliners,
all those, yes, right. So now, it is, now the onus is now on federal government, because Ghana is also stifling their visa process. Before, when you go to Ghana, the road is free. I remember I've passed through that route. They will just check you and you go. But now it is getting difficult. You know why? Ghanaians are even saying that Nigerians are taking over their job. The same thing South Africa will always tell you. And we are high in population. That no matter the number that goes out, we don't even know that people have gone out of Nigeria. So government needs to do more. And the bane of the issue is that Nigeria must be economically viable for us to be able to stay, do business and enjoy it. Though we're supposed to be at the better end of it, because we have more purchasing power in Africa, we have the population in Africa, so that should have been an advantage for us. That even trade within states, intrastate, is better than what's the population of Ghana? Maybe 60 million or whatever. So will you compare it to 200 million Nigerians? So federal government need to do more by making sure that they empower Nigerians more in terms of tech, in terms of manufacturing, and also make loan accessible for us. And that's what some of us are complaining about NPR. That if NPR is 27.5% and you expect Nigerians to stay in Nigeria and do business, it's pretty difficult. So you cannot go to banks and get soft loan that you can easily use to do business. So Bank of Agriculture, Bank of Industry, they all need to come together and do more, so Nigeria can even have something to do within. Because the more Nigeria MSME is working, so let's even do the analysis. Let's assume we have 40 million MSME. So imagine if one MSME employs two persons. Do you know how many employment it creates? This is why federal government needs to do more to empower our small business to scale.
Now, let's look at it from the continental implications of this. Now, not only do we have xenophobic attacks in South Africa targeting Nigerians, now just our neighbors besides us here on the West African coast, the Ghanaians, are not having these hateful tendencies towards Nigerians. What does this speak to us as individuals, away from what the government can do as a people? What does this do to our image?
Right. I think of recent, some people travel to Cairo in Egypt and I try to do findings. What are you going there to actually do? They just do two objectives: a maid or prostitute. So if Nigerians can go in that direction, so sometimes it's even beyond federal government too. We as individuals have to do more. Some menial job you cannot do home. You prefer to go to those countries and go and do. If you tell Nigerians who is in Nigeria to take care of old, you will see it as something that is awful. But if you go to those places, and you won't blame them too, in the long run they are looking for money. So we must also work on our orientation. Maybe by this time the NOA,
National Orientation
Agency can do more, because I saw one video they are taking around, a lady who is saying somebody traveled abroad and he came back to Nigeria, and those are the kind of narrative. So let them do more to educate and orient people. But by and large, our small business need to work so that people can actually stay to do business.
Well, it's more like the icebreaker on the program this morning. The right place to start the show, as much as the federal government is looking to midwife the situation with the recent Nigeria must go protest in Ghana. As individuals, what can we do differently? Dr. Aliyu has called for an ethical reorientation. Much later on the program this morning, we hope to talk to a man who says the quest to rebrand Nigeria is achievable. How do we go about it would be the big questions. Now, moving away from the icebreaker, let's get into the crux of political matters making the rounds this morning. Now, earlier on, Senator Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso had started what many have said fueled the fire on the notion that the northern part of the country is being marginalized under the current administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Now, in a bid to control this narrative and rewrite the notion, the APC National Chairman, Professor Yilwatda, alongside the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Senator George Akume, were all in Kaduna, as hosted by Senator Uba Sani. And it's on the position that looks to rally the North back in line with the President for what we will call now a re-election bid or a reassurance in terms of the President's priority for the North. What do you make of this most recent move? Right.
You recall that Senator Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso said the North has been neglected by the Tinubu-led government. You know, he's actually working on people's intuition, which is accepted in political, way. You can also see Charlie Boy Chintu Bado. It's quest to work on people's intuition. So for me, I think it's a serious battle now, because once people like Senator Musa Rabiu Kwankwaso made mention of that, it's as if you can see the ACF, Arewa Consultative Forum, are also saying the same thing, that they have been marginalized, and that's why you could see that the Yilwatda is actually mouthful, and the Kaduna State governor and maybe the Secretary to Federal Government are also trying to rally around. Now, there is this common saying that come on board during this Tinubu era, and what's the common saying? That next election is going to be between Tinubu and Nigerians. You recall that is the common statement, that the position of poverty is going to be what will actually fight the current administration. So beyond moving around the streets and trying to canvass for support, there isn't for them to also work on the economic aspect of it, because as an economist, that's what we think. People in the long run will consider what they're actually eating, their survivor. You know, survivor will make them to make decisions, even though before now people are so funny that when you give them money, they will actually vote for you. But I'm not sure this will be terrible, because it's shown during the last election in Lagos, Tinubu was not voted for. In Edo, Tinubu was not voted for. So if Tinubu could lose his home state, that simply means that people are more political people are much more educated. They're now following their mind, not the money that you give to them. And I pray we'll get to that level. You understand? So I think that is the major crux of the matter. However, Kwankwaso is also appealing. He is trying to seek, for now, I can tell you.
So you think it's lobby?
I can tell you now. I can tell you now that the most politically valued person in the North is Kwankwaso. So his statements actually carries weight, and that's why APC will not want to joke with that, because you cannot even compare the popularity of Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso with Atiku. You know why? He even has a state in his hand, and when you're talking about states that matters in election, is Kano. Is one of the leading states that matters. So that's why this fight is just starting. Kwankwaso will keep on dipping what he's saying. APC will keep on dipping what he's saying. But the challenge now is this: are we sure it's not still a political game? Because I see Kwankwaso in APC in the long run. But let's see how it's turned out.
Now, Governor Uba Sani begs to differ on the position of Senator Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso. He believes, as against the president being responsible for, would I say, the slow-paced infrastructural development in the north, he believes that northern leaders are to blame.
Right. I used to have a particular perspective about the north and about the south. Now, if you give south equal amounts, they are giving the north, right? I'm believing that not the same amount for south, the same amount for north. I believe the south will have more roads. The north will have more roads compared to the south. You know why? In the south, down part of Nigeria, there's need to construct a lot of bridges. There's need to fill a lot of valley. There's erosion problem. There is thick forest. But in the north, you may not have reason to build a bridge. You don't have reason to fill any valley. You don't have reason to actually cut a thick forest. So their advantage naturally in terms of road construction. However, we've got President Muhammadu Buhari for a good 8 years. You know, what has he done differently? Even though for me he still try in terms of infrastructure, what has he done differently in that area? Then, you know, you will recall that immediately he made mention of that, Sunday Dare, the spokesperson of Bola Ahmed Tinubu, came out and started mentioning all the road they're actually doing in the north. So I cannot say categorically that you will say Tinubu is neglecting the north in terms of infrastructure, but it's a cumulative effect of where's a lackluster or like a residual attitude of our leaders in terms of road construction.
Now in reference to the north particularly, I also get the notion that some regions believe that they are more north than others. Because when I looked at the projects listed by the spokesperson Sunday Dare, he almost feels as though, in the notion of Senator Rabi Musa Konko, so I'm not speaking for him, he believes that those might not be key northern states. Do you believe that this is another narrative gaining grounds?
Honestly, it's a bad narrative. I'm a northerner and I'm from the north central. So sometimes we north central mostly felt, and that should be correct, that sometimes they think we are sub-northerners compared to Kanu, Katsina, Jigawa, and core northeast, and that's a wrong narrative. Once it's a north, it is north. Because when it comes to election, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is from southwest and Lagos in particular, but we said it's a southern president position because an average northeasterner, you know, is an Igbo person. Somebody from south is also not an Igbo person, not a Yoruba person, but they are the south. So when we should stop that narrative, because once you start that narrative, that simply means that you are much more north or more Nigerian compared to others. It's a wrong narrative, and I think as a leader to his level, he shouldn't be, you know, pushing such a narrative to Nigerians.
Well, it's one of those comments that could stoke the embers and heat up the politics ahead of a re-election bid by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, with efforts of the APC National Chairman and the SGF looking to rally the North back in line to support President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Particularly, the National Security Advisor Malam Nuru Badu, adding to this debate on ground, said that the incidence of Boko Haram and banditry has reduced under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu as compared to the days of President Muhammadu Buhari. May his soul rest in peace. Now this brings us to another angle of the conversation, the debates on power rotation. Although it's much or less an unwritten agreement that power needs to oscillate between the north and the south. These debates are getting more intensified ahead of 2027. And it's from the angle of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's scorecard. The Arewa Consultative Forum is planning for a performance review in Kaduna. It's quite in contrast to the position of the Kaduna state governor. But how much of the political decisions do the Arewa Consultative Forum sway in regards to this debate on power rotation? So my question is now, if they're unsatisfied with the president's performance, can they do anything to change this unwritten agreement of power rotation?
Bito, it is expected that such things should happen, but I'm happy that it's happening because if you left, that's why when ADC came on board and when ACF talk, when Ohaneze Indigbo talk, when what do we have in the south, when they actually talk, you know, I believe that it's a good one because it's also position the president to know what is actually happening, so that they are coming together to actually do a review in Kaduna. I think it's a good one, so that by the time they review, they would have given them their standard, and it's happening under APC governor. He has no choice because it is their office they are actually using there. But the fact is that if they are sincere enough, right, and I will not blame ACF. Remember, ACF never even supported President Muhammadu Buhari. You recall?
Yes, that's correct.
I recall Baba Ahmed, who is the spokesperson of Arewa Consultative Forum. Every time always said Buhari is not doing well during Buhari government. So I think it's not a bad thing if they actually came out during Southerner turn now to actually say. Then in terms of rotational, it is not constitutional. So they have rights to also bring somebody to contest. It's not a bad thing. Perhaps the issue of rotational is because of our condition in Nigeria in particular, which I supported. I believe in rotational simply because let the power move around. we have qualified person in every region to take a lead, and it should even trickle down to the state. Because we go to some states now, state like Benue, state like Kogi, you see some ethnic, dominating the other one, which bring development to those that are in power compared to those that are not in power. So it's a good one for them to come challenge the current president, because if you cannot just relax, we are not a military administration where you won't have an opinion. So they should allow them to air their opinion. President Bola Tinubu said something. He said, I am the president, and if you say anything, I got to hear it, I will implement it, and there's nothing you can do. So let them go and do that meeting and tell him where Nigeria is lagging behind, and let's see him taking it and working on it.
Well, this is quite instructive, owing that the next point of call is on the reassurance coming in from President Bola Tinubu. Much like Dr. Aliyu Ilias has said, a statement made by the president following his condolence visit to Benue, where he said he is not against opposition alternatives. And in his position as president, if they prefer alternative solutions, he would implement it to the best interest of Nigerians. Now, the president is looking to reassure the North of development and his attention. Now, particularly, I don't know, unlike the southern part where there are key projects where the South can actually say that they have been abandoned, much like the East-West Road, much like the need for an Eastern Railway corridor, and even the ongoing Calabar to Lagos Coastal Highway, or some of these landmark infrastructural projects that the region has been yearning for. Now, you talked about itemizing some of the needs that the president might choose to implement. If the North, or even if I say the core northern states, like they like to call them, have some of these projects, do you think of some that might come to mind in light of the most recent mishaps that have plagued Niger State? We talked about the flood that eroded one of the corridor roads through that state. What are some projects that the president might choose to prioritize should they submit recommendations?
Well, for me, I don't think president has neglected them, because we need to correct that impression. Because I know there is Sokoto Badagry rail that's actually ongoing. They mentioned there's some road between Bauchi, Jos Bauchi Highway. I think they just approved that yesterday.
Talking about Jos Bauchi, that road has been more born for years.
For years. So now that he has came to actually fill that road, I think they are trying to balance. Perhaps, remember, we have people in National Assembly, and their responsibilities to agitate for their own region, their own constituency. So, and they are the one that passes this budget, because government president cannot just go and pick money via money and fix some roads. So I think it has passed through budgetary allocation, and that's why. So if they have any concern, they should channel it through their own senators. Let them see how legislature can actually bring it on board, or pass it through the executive budgetary allocation for it. So I think that's the best way to, because if you start agitating, and president is responding to the agitation of the North, the Southeast will start, the South will start, and it will not contain, it's not what we can manage. I recall the most Igbo saying that they have been neglected even in this administration, that they have less position, which they have right to say. So if we give room for each, and that's why I have the issue with the issue of regional commissions that actually have, that this will cause another level of agitation, and it can lead to secession, because people will start looking at, okay, we have been neglected.
But it seems as though the president has been quite just and even in that sharing of development commissions.
It's because we have Northeast Commission that brings about this, and Northeast Commission have a peculiar issue of Boko Haram. That was what brings about it. But before every other state, but because president wants to be politically correct, that's why he keep on approving all those. For me, it's uncalled for, because state is coming for its allocation. So why are you now creating regional again? Because once you give state its allocation, because region will now determine who needs it. No project that will be done that will not have a state coloration, because it must be started in particular. It can even be between boundary of which state. It should be two states. So for me, in as much as state is getting their own allocation, there's not really need for creating a regional.
So you believe these regional commissions will bring about feuding amongst the states and
bureaucratic bottleneck, another allocation, employ people that actually they don't need to actually do it. So it's a serious one for me. But this is federal government.
But relatively, you talked about the Northeast Development Commission. Now, if we're to review their performance in terms of the deliverables so far, how would you say they have performed?
We cannot underestimate their performance, because you recall that a lot of things got disrupted in that area. In fact, most of the economic life was actually distorted. So for them to get succor, for them to get some relief, it's not a bad, because what happens to them is not what they actually called for, and it's like a war zone, and you need to have it. They need special attention, which is normal. So is other people are they in war zone too?
But in the Northeast, do you think that there's any state that would say it has benefited the most from the interventions that have come in to the Northeast Development Commission?
Certainly, a state like Borno, and that's why when they want to do the issue of tax reform, recall that Borno was actually saying, if you implement this tax reform, people will be much more behind. Poverty will come, because they have percentage they are collecting from VAT, which is going to change from January. So definitely they are benefiting from it.
Quite interesting takes there. Let's leave the political scene and come to economics, which is your forte. The challenge with the rebased GDP is that despite the optics, there's still high inflation. There are still structural challenges. This morning again, we saw a review of the IMF's projected growth for Nigeria. Other than the 3.1 reported in our GDP, is now being pegged at 3.4%. What's the real situation in your honest opinion?
Right. You see, the rebased GDP is expected simply because statutorily every 5 years you are expected to rebase. And you recall that we only rebased to 2019 because that 2019 was the best year, which we don't have issue economic, like pre-pandemic and whatever. So that is the reason. Then the rebasing has came to actually is expository in nature, because it has came to expose our status. Now it has benefits, and the benefits actually for me outweigh other things you could think of. Now, what is the benefit? The benefit is that as an investor, I now see business opportunity, because I'm looking at the status. It also put us in a ranking. Now globally we are number 40 economy. Africa, we should be number 4 in terms of the economy. So it's giving us our status level, even though our status, this is not our real status. Ideally, you're supposed to be number 1 economy in Africa. Why? Imagine if dollar, it is 500, not 1,500, because there's what we call deflator. The deflator has came because when you rank any economy, you now use that deflator, which is currency value, to deflate, and that's why we find ourselves at number 4. So it's because of our currency. We are still the largest economy in terms of GDP. So now another thing is that GDP also show government the policy direction. Government, there's need for you to look at real estate. Real estate before is not captured. We're not looking at household consumption. We are looking at government consumption. We are looking at foreign direct investment. So this has exposed us that, okay, policy direction should be direct to this area. Now we have captured a lot of things that we are not capturing before. This will also show them that employment can be channeled through blue economy. It can be channeled through display. So it's quite exposed, but the caveat is that it does not reduce poverty in any way. If I thought to reduce poverty, it will be maybe after 6 months, 1 year, because it will give it policy direction. But for now, it does not have any correlation with the status of poverty. Then in terms of inflation, our major drivers of inflation is food, and we must do more to actually work on that. Then we now come to MPR again. Why our small business not doing business is because there is no fund. So for me, it's a good one that will rebase the GDP, but it does not anyway reflect or better the status of the economy. But IMF projection of 3.4 is quite obvious, because once you have GDP rise, and I told you earlier again that we do more exports than import, so we are having balance of payments to an extent now. So that could be a trigger, and why they are looking at us getting better in this year. If you also notice, they also put 3.2 for 2026. So you look at it, why are you raising us high here and you are raising us there? However, to crown it all, Bretton Woods institutions have their metrics and they have their objective. So beyond what is happening in your country, they have their own objective.
Now let's talk about what we can do internally, because
Right.
you talked about access to capital for businesses, largely prerogative of the CBN. But the CBN in its most latest meeting chose to maintain status quo in some instance. Despite this high inflation, it's on the access to capital and the paybacks in terms of the loans.
Right. You recall that most of us are scolding the last CBN governor, Emefiele, that is doing some intervention that is not supposed to do ordinarily. And I recall the emir of Kano, Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, also go through that trajectory. You recall that during the Emefiele and Buhari era, they actually do what is called anchor borrower. Remember anchor borrower? They also give a grant. These are what makes business much more easier during that period. Because I recall that most farmers have access to anchor borrower and they cultivate rice a lot, that at a point we are almost self-sufficient. But that has been eroded now because the border is now opening and they are now bringing those things. So most of our rice millers are now closing shop because the import own is actually eroding the profit they would have made. And I think it's an error on the part of federal government. We must be self-sufficient and we must empower. That's why some of us are talking about African continental free trade area. That those things you must specify what they can bring to you and what they cannot bring to you. Tell them don't bring food into Nigeria, don't bring textile, don't bring shoe, because a bad man can actually produce shoe for you if you give him an enabling environment. So those are the things we must work on, and also provide capital, access to capital, because access to capital is key. In fact, you are supposed to actually have a specific fund from Bank of Agriculture, Bank of Industry. If CBN does not want to intervene, why not channel the money down to this agency? Remember, there was this one that they even created. Is it NISA that was handled by NIPOST that they will go.
That's correct.
Exactly. So those are the things intervention Buhari government actually did that makes small business to access capital and actually scale. But we don't have such again now, which is a serious problem.
Now, quite interestingly, when we look at all this, it's a focus on non-oil. And particularly with the rebased GDP, we can see that the performance of the service sector, non-oil sectors are contributing the most. But when we come to the oil sector, even before talking about its contribution, one of the biggest alarms that is on the table right now is the need for the Senate to probe over 210 trillion naira in an audit gap. Now, whilst many would argue that this did not happen under Engineer Bayo Ojulari, the NNPCL is being scrutinized. Now, the Senate in its most recent order has given 3 weeks to Engineer Bayo Ojulari, saying that he must come forward and make explanations of what transpired between 2017 to 2023. How much of a big issue is this, and do you think that this probe would yield a much needed result?
If you ask me, this is highest level of distraction. They are distracting themselves or focusing on what is much more important. They're also distracting Bayo Ojulari of doing his statutory job. Now, during those periods that these things happens, those people are still alive. Why not call on them to come and give account of when they are in government? Why are you distracting someone? It's barely 6 months that is there. So for me,
so you believe it is
100%
a tactical distraction?
It's a tactical distraction. What do you
believe
want?
They should go after
those people. Go after those people. Let them come. By the time you go after them, they will now reference their office. You now call those directors during that period to come and provide. So why are you distracting? So we just came to fix a lot of errors. It's pure distraction. Then don't let us deceive ourselves. The biggest enemy of Nigeria is still oil and gas.
Despite this GDP report.
Right, because that's what give us foreign, what do you call it?
Exchange.
Foreign exchange. So nothing more. Though we have to do more, because I recall
90% of our
90%.
Exchange.
I recall President Muhammad Buhari was trying to actually diversify to agriculture, which he did, and you can see the result. Agriculture is taking the lead, but at what level? Imagine if we mechanize. Imagine if we do more and empower them. Value addition is even the major thing. If you go to Ethiopia, what's their business? It's farming and airline, and they are serious about it. So until we do that and give these farmers. And I told you there was anchor borrower, there was money for farming and what. That's why we get to this level. So this government must also try to do more in that level.
I agree with you. The call to mechanize has also been hinged by some of the challenges that also robs off on value addition, because you'd have to have the industries coming. A lot
Cottage
of these processes
industry,
need power to drive them.
Right.
This brings us to our last talking point before we say our goodbyes this morning. It's the electricity and the power sector by extension. This morning, one of the newspapers had an editorial on electricity customers still being overbilled, metering shortages. But my issue with this story is also from the angle of the conflicts between regulatory agencies, because I believe that's the bane of the issue, particularly with the Electricity Act Amendment Bill. I've seen the pushback on the part of the government. I've seen states, much to their credit, trying to take the initiative to cut tariffs. Holistically speaking, in your opinion, where are we with the challenges that are mitigating against our sectors thriving owing to our power needs?
It's quite saddening that since we privatized NEPA to PHCN and we unbundled that area, that up till now we could not meter customers. Right. So let's go back to the decision making. Why will we have Disco that cannot meter his customer? That's the question. So what is the responsibility of Disco? For me, I'll buy meter by myself. The day I buy that meter, it becomes the property of the Discos. I'll buy pole. The day I buy that pole, it becomes property of the Disco. Right. So what is the responsibility of Disco?
In the event that your transformer has an issue,
you fix it yourself.
To fix it.
So they're just portfolio investors who just came to Nigeria to make profits. I don't see their work. And that's why we get it wrong. Now that you have unbundled that sector, state is now saying that allow me to decide how much I will pay. The federal government is saying no, we will not pay, we will not support you, don't have rights to. So why are you now giving them the capacity? Why do you unbundle that sector in the first place? Because what I expect federal government to do, it doesn't come cheap. Why not challenge this state to go and get their own generating company? If you want to actually have holistic power, go and get your own generating company. Because by now I expect a Niger Delta region, Southwest Commission to start thinking in that direction. Let's have our own. By the time you have our own, we will now have power. As yesterday, the minister said they have 13 million capacity or so of electricity, and we only have access to 4. So where is the remaining 11 or what have you is doing? You must find a way to transmit it to people. So I think we need much more investment, and they should allow states to invest without stifling them or give them more conditionalities that will discourage them.
Now, still talking about the power minister and his speech yesterday, he was reacting to the situation in Enugu. You talked about getting a generation plant. His position was that if Enugu insists on reviewing the tariff downward for electricity consumers, they need to pay the existing subsidies to the federal government. This regulatory conflict and the fact that, as it were now, there's still the interconnectivity on the national grid. How does the Electricity Act Amendment Bill solve this issue without being likened to the case of local government autonomy and the judgment from the Supreme Court?
Right. So, the beauty of law is that you can always go back to do amendments. I think this is time for the amendment again. So, a senator should look into this crisis critically and propose a better way to solve it. I don't believe that the Enugu should go ahead to do it. However, if you are giving somebody autonomy, allow him to exercise it to the fullest. So tell him that, okay, you pay the shortfall. If you agree, you will pay. Why are you giving him condition ab initio? I think they have to look at it very well. So senators should look into it properly.
Now, the concluding part is this customer reclassification, particularly with Band A. It's the case that even some Band A customers are captured under those with metering shortages. This has also had its effects on revenue collection in terms of its efficiency and the actual amounts that are recouped from the electricity consumers. How do we ensure that there are no, in the Nigerian parlance, mago-mago in that instance?
Well, there will be mago-mago because there is no system to check mago-mago. And that's the funny part of it. So until we strengthen and work on our system very well, and the thing still lies on federal government, you know, you must give them the discourse. Condition them that within 6 months, because I recall I purchased a meter and you told me that they will remove the money from the meter. I don't even mind, but give me the meter first. So by the time you give me the meter, every subscription you deduct a particular amount. So I think we should do that, and I don't see why that's another problem some of us are agitating for. Why should we be importing meter when you can call those company or Nigerian company to start producing meter here? I think that's our problem. So federal government must look into that area and make sure that meter is being manufactured in Nigeria. That will bring solution.
Now, this is as much as we can discuss on the stories greeting the front pages of the newspapers this morning, but we must thank you for your objectivity in a review of these stories and your ever presence when we call for you to be on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.